But yeah, so Dave Rubin decided to do this surrounded video, and I've done a few of these, and never would I have expected someone like Dave Rubin to hop in the middle, considering he has to know that he is not only out of his depth, but not equipped for this type of environment. He's not a skilled debater, and he's also just not very nuanced in the types of knowledge that he has. He's not a high level conservative thinker. I think his level of financial success probably overinflates to the extent of which he thinks that he's smarter even than the average like political person. But he should also know that like it's not just random people who go on these things. It's people who are excited to debate the topics and are going to prepare in advance. And that was on full display in this video. So I ended up debating him as the first debater, as well as one later down the line. So we'll go through each debate. What's up, Unc? How's it going? All right.
You're arguing that things economically were better under Joe Biden.
At the end of his administration, absolutely.
Yeah, so can you give me an example of how?
Yeah, GDP growth was better off, real median wage growth was better off, inflation was better off at the end of his administration, unemployment was better off at the end of his administration. We had the worst year of job growth in the past 4 years, just this last year under Trump's administration.
Was the Rubin report, did that also accept Russian money?
What show did I do for Russia?
No, I'm not saying you did a show for Russia. I'm saying Russia saw you as a stooge who could easily say the talking points that benefited them.
But what law is stopping you from doing anything that another person cannot do?
Laws are not protecting trans people. If they were, trans people would not be disproportionately unemployed, unhoused,
what would you like
the
law to do for you? Again, the law can guarantee equality. It can't guarantee protection, right? So
yes, it certainly can.
So
has wokeness pushed America past the breaking point, or is the progressive movement the only answer to MAGA? I'm John Regalado, and from Jubilee Media, this is Surrounded, where one brave soul faces a room full of disagreeers. Today we're unpacking what it means to be far left, the backlash to wokeness, and what your vote stands for in the upcoming midterm election.
It should be noted that he did this surrounded specifically, and I mean the title is kind of almost it's almost like paradoxical. It's 20 far left Democrats. Typically people who associate themselves and would describe themselves as being far left would not associate with the label Democrat. That's usually, that's an affiliation with the party, not necessarily like political ideology. Whatever. But considering Jubilee had done another video, which was 20 far right Republicans, and that video ended up just being literally filled with Nazis. I mean, if you watch the Mehdi Hasan one, that's the one that he did. And Mehdi went into that expecting a lot of just diehard Trump supporters, but they were people well to the right of Donald Trump, people who were open in their fascistic ideology and tendencies. But Dave Rubin went into this one wanting to face off against 20 far left Democrats. And I think because he did that, he was expecting the crazies in the same way that Mehdi Hasan got the crazies in his debate. Thankfully, Mehdi is like probably one of the few people that could actually have done a video like that and decimated each and every one of them, like in a responsible platforming manner. Granted, I think Mehdi to some degree wishes that he hadn't had done that, but I digress. I think that Dave Rubin, by specifying 20 far left Democrats, thought that he was going to get people who were too crazy to seem reasonable, but he ended up getting everyone from the political spectrum. I mean, there's people on here who certainly identify as liberal. There's people on here such as Zena who identifies as communist. There's people who maybe identify as more just democratic socialist. But it was still a broad array within the political spectrum, because even within the Democratic Party, like a lot of them would associate even the younger pro-liberal, pro-democratic content creators as being, far left.
Election. I'm here with our featured guest, conservative commentator Dave Rubin. Welcome.
It's good to be here.
Are y'all ready to debate Dave? Yeah. Let's begin.
I'm Dave Rubin of The Rubin Report, and today I'm surrounded by the far left.
The far left.
My first surrounded claim is that wokeism did more damage to America than Trump ever did.
And so a little bit of a sneak peek into this. We do not know who the person is going into these debates. However, we do get topics a little bit out. And so when I had seen that the topics were very culture war focused, usually when conservatives hang onto culture war statements and culture war issues and aren't very specific, that's how you know that they're going to be a layup, like that their arguments are going to be relatively weak because they're not on a solid foundation. It gives them enough wiggle room to point out, crazy anecdotes of the far left having weird cultural politics rather than something that's solidified. Santana in the TikTok chat, what is up? How's it going? Thanks for sharing the live, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, if you would like to debate this claim, please get to the center in 3, 2, 1.
He's quick.
Yes, I am. So I find it interesting that you think wokeism has done so much damage to America as opposed to Donald Trump. Wokeism did not kick 17 million Americans off of their health insurance through Medicaid. Wokeism didn't start a disastrous war with Iran that has now led to inflation outpacing wage growth. Wokeism hasn't ripped up institutions or attempted even to destroy free speech, even by your standards, because Ronald Reagan appointed judge ruled that the Trump administration was violating the First Amendment by attempting to deport, arrest, and detain students and faculty members on college campuses for protesting for Palestine. Wokeism, to me, it doesn't even have remotely as disastrous as a track record as Donald Trump.
Well, how would you?
So I just want to point out, I gave him 3 material facts that, because the claim is relative, right? The claim that he's making is comparing the damage to America between wokeism, this amorphous term, and Donald Trump, someone who we can very directly point to substantive policy over. And I gave him 3 matters of material harm. So kicking people off of their health insurance, I think it's self-evident. The disastrous war with Iran, beyond, the horrific human impact or the financial taxpayer impact, it's also led to inflation due to the Islamic Republic closing the Strait of Hormuz, which is something that you totally expect out of starting a war with Iran. It's led to inflation now outpacing wage growth. So it's harmed everyone, all working class people effectively economically. I mean, the only people who have really benefited from these rising prices are oil executives who've been able to price gouge as an opportunity from the high inflation. So I demonstrated it with those material points. And then the last thing was this was Donald Trump was found to have violated the First Amendment rights of non-citizen students and faculty members on college campuses last year because he uses ICE to arrest, intimidate, detain them, and it has this, and even if they're not effectively deported at the end, it does have a chilling effect, which is one of the biggest fears of weaponizing the federal government to go after people for their freedom of speech. And in this case, it was people who were protesting for Palestine, right? People who were protesting against in a foreign nation. They're protesting against Israel. They may have been protesting more specifically about their university's relationship with that nation, but nonetheless, violating the First Amendment, something that someone like Dave Rubin spent so much of his early political career when he was making this pivot to the right, centered around. It was that the far left does not care about freedom of speech. They want to shut down debate. They want to shut down discourse. And yet, I was able to demonstrate that through a federal judge's ruling, Donald Trump is the one that's actually violated the First Amendment, not this amorphous wokeism that you fearmonger about.
You define wokeism. I guess we should start with that.
I think wokeism is a pejorative term that's used to describe left-wing cultural politics.
Right. And what do you think left-wing cultural politics are?
I'd say left-wing cultural politics include just the broad attitudes towards social justice, especially for minority groups that have faced persecution in various ways.
Okay, so I think the simplest way to define wokeism is basically collectivism on steroids, and usually as it applies to race and gender, meaning that you should be judged based on the color. You actually should be judged based on the color of your skin and your sexuality and your gender and a whole bunch of immutable characteristics. And depending on where those fall on the left's kind of hierarchy of importance, that's kind of how you can parse out where people should be and how important they're.
This is what happens when you are not equipped in these sorts of conversations and when you've lived in your effective echo chamber for so long, because what he just explained essentially was his narrative about wokeism, and that would work perfectly on the Rubin report, where he exists in an echo chamber and just talks to other like-minded people, as he's been doing for the last decade or so. But it doesn't work in this conversation. I mean, and which is why, like, I just found it so fascinating that he didn't even attempt to address my claim. He just wanted to sort of rattle off his idea of what wokeism is. And I don't even know how I'm supposed to address that fictitious definition. So what instead I do is I'm just like, okay, we may have different concepts of this, but can you actually demonstrate that it's in any way done more damage to America than Donald Trump, as you've specifically laid out?
People should be and how important their ideas are.
So even assuming your characterization to be an accurate characterization, which I don't necessarily take.
Right. We're going to have a lot of trouble getting to a fair agreement on
that
wokeism.
Wokeism has, for example, skyrocketed inflation to outpace wage growth the way that Donald Trump's war of aggression on Iran has done? Can you demonstrate that wokeism has violated the First Amendment by arresting students and faculty members on college campuses?
Okay, well, yes, I can. So let's start. Well, first off, the disastrous war, the quote-unquote disastrous war that you're talking about. You're talking about a 40-day military operation that stopped an apocalyptic regime from getting a nuclear bomb and exporting terrorism throughout the world. And we're now in an economic embargo of them, right? We've basically done a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. So to say it's a disastrous war,
we've done a blockade.
We did lose. Hang on. We did lose 13.
So one of the reasons why I thought that statement was hilarious, because what was the United States blockade in the Strait of Hormuz for? The U.S. blockade was because our only option of action was to do a blockade of Iran, because they had closed the Strait of Hormuz by threatening oil tankers to pass through their drones. Right. So they effectively control the strait. They were effectively able to close it for everyone else. So our only response to that was a measure of implementing a blockade on them. Like, our blockade was not a way of exercising power. The United States wants the strait open. The strait being closed hurts us economically far more than it damages the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so he uses the fact that we have a blockade as a means to, I guess, show that it's not disastrous, but it's perfectly, but our blockade is perfectly demonstrative of how disastrous it has been, because it was one of the few things we could do as a desperate attempt to hurt them further, because they had closed the strait. Did you see Matt Nuclear Grok chat? I did, yes. In fact, there's something coming out Friday. Something coming out on this YouTube channel that we call Jubilee is coming out Friday, and it involves both me and Matt Nuclear, so stay tuned for that.
We did lose 13 of our soldiers, and that is
and killed over
terrible.
200 children.
But well, things happen in war, right?
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
Well, things do happen.
What's funny too is he literally just said it's a military operation, a 40-day military operation, and now he's saying, well, things happen in war, so it is a war. It's 100% a war. You've just admitted as much. And I could fight on this. It's one of the aspects I think that is most, grotesque about this Tomahawk missile that killed over 160 children. On top of that, there's been at least 40 other Iranian children that have died as a result of U.S. and Israeli airstrikes. But one of the most grotesque aspects about it is that our government has totally and completely tried to avoid any sort of accountability, even as much as just admitting that it was our strike, right? And if the United States military is going to be so grossly incompetent as to strike an elementary school, I don't understand how you're going to suggest that we're going to be fully confident and fully competent in our broader strategy.
Yeah, you can laugh at that. Hold on, listen. You want to talk?
I agree, but that's why war should be a last option. If Donald Trump wanted to prevent the Islamic Republic of Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, he could have just stuck with the Iran nuclear deal that he ripped up. Iran did not enrich past the 3.67. Wait, they didn't enrich past the 3.67% agreed upon in the JCPOA.
And so here's another thing. I could argue, like, my position ultimately is that, like, I don't necessarily find a good reason to believe why a nation like Israel gets to have nuclear weapons, but a nation like Iran doesn't. And I do believe, to the extent that they're pursuing nuclear weapons, is for deterrence purposes. I could argue that, but what's more effective in this case is these people, their primary sticking point, or their primary reason as to suggest why we needed to go to war with Iran, is that there was 60% enriched uranium, which is beyond the need for civilian use, and that proves that they were directly pursuing a nuclear weapon. Therefore, we needed to go to war with them. But if you acknowledge that war should be a last option, and that because of the great extent of civilian harm that's going to manifest as a result of this war. And I don't believe that the United States launched this war because of Iran attempting to obtain a nuclear weapon. I know that U.S. intelligence suggests that Iran was not, in fact, pursuing a nuclear weapon, that and is actually more corroborative with the idea that they were just enriching to that level for negotiating leverage. But that's besides the point. If you just acknowledge that war should be a last resort because of the horrific things that happen in war, such as the innocent loss of life, or the economic catastrophic consequences, you have to prove to me that you've used and exhausted all other routes, one of which needs to be diplomacy. And the JCPOA proves that if your concern is Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon, diplomacy actually did work in that instance. So it's a silly case to make that we needed to go to war against Iran because they were attempting to pursue or obtain a nuclear weapon, when we know that diplomacy kept them at a lower level of highly enriched uranium. Now, the truth of the matter is, and again, this is like what you have to do when you're navigating these sorts of conversations, is pick your battles. The truth of the matter is that the United States wanted regime change. We may have not have listed it out in our official strategic goal memo that came out days after the war was already launched. But if you look at the speech from either Donald Trump the night that Israel and the United States launched this war in Iran, or if you look at what he was mentioning to the Washington Post, or of course all of the rhetoric leading up to the war, it was very clear that the United States was sold a basket of goods by Mossad intelligence and by Netanyahu, that if they carried out, these assassination, decapitation airstrikes and took out much of the leadership of the IRGC and killed the Ayatollah, that the regime would collapse, or that there would be some sort of stoked uprising from the people. And because that didn't manifest, our almost post hoc rationale for the war then became about nuclear weapons, which I do think that some of these, neoconservative hawks have a concern over. But without a doubt, these people wanted regime change. And so that's the truth of the matter. But again, that's not something that I needed to get into here, because even if it was about nuclear weapons, they would still be wrong on the merits.
They only got to 60% after Donald Trump left that deal and then started doing aggressive actions.
I must say, I'm impressed with your talking points. You got impressive talking points, and you memorized them well. They're not correct, but I am impressed.
Okay.
First off, the Iranians admitted in the negotiations right before the war started that they were enriching past what they were allowed to. That's number one. Number two, you also have to go on the assumption. You also have to go. Hold on.
Because we
hold on. You also have.
The acceptance.
Oh no, David, you fucked me up, bro. I fucking accidentally clicked away from it to click on your chat. No, I'm just kidding. David, what's up? Wow, look who's live. I know. I am gonna try to do this again. Yeah, I'm gonna try to get back into live streaming. I wasn't loving it for a while, I think, just because I was trying to do it too often, but I think if I stick to once a week and then maybe increase if I, begin to like it again, I'll jump back into it. But yeah, excited. You should be excited for Friday. There's going to be a new video released on this here YouTube channel, and it's going to involve a debate with Ben Shapiro's newest hire and yours truly.
Started that they were enriching past what they were allowed to. That's number one. Number two, you also have to go on the assumption. You also have to go. Hold on. You also have to go on the assumption or acceptance that can you agree or verify their claims. It's one thing to say, oh, this is what we're doing, this is what we are agreed to, etc. But you have to be able to verify that. And the idea that we have people on the ground or the UN or some third-party organization that can verify what they're actually doing with underground nuclear sites. And
I love how he just baselessly attempts to undermine the credibility of the IAEA. He probably doesn't even know what the IAEA is, but he's like, oh, what, some third-party organization with the most aggressive inspections in the entire world. That was what was happening under the JCPOA.
A whole bunch of other things is I would say quite a leap of faith, right? You want to trust but verify.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So
it did get quite nuclear. It did.
IAEA and U.S. intelligence said that Iran did not enrich past the 3.67% prior to Donald Trump ripping up and stepping out of the Iran nuclear deal in I believe it was 2017, 2018.
So again,
when he did that.
In these negotiations,
because Donald Trump ripped up the Iran nuclear deal to begin with, that's the only reason why.
So before he pivots, I need you to make sure you understand how this conversation has gone so far. The claim is that wokeism has done more damage to America than Trump ever did. My point, obviously, is that Donald Trump has done a lot of damage to America. One of the reasons why is starting a war with Iran. Now, he claims that one of the reasons why we needed to start a war with Iran was because Iran was obtaining a nuclear weapon. And one of the pieces of evidence for that is that they were getting up to 60% of highly enriched uranium. My point is that even if you want to say that that is evidence for Iran pursuing a nuclear weapon, whose fault is it that they got that? It is Donald Trump, which is entirely what this claim is about. Donald Trump leaving the JCPOA is exactly what preceded Iran developing to 60% enriched uranium. And he knows that that's my point, but he just wants to reassert the assertion that, well, they were at 60% prior to the war. But that doesn't at all address whether or not it was Donald Trump's fault because of the policies that he pursued in his first term.
Let's try it a different way. I'll try it a different way.
The IAEA assessments agree with me, and Tulsi Gabbard, our director of national intelligence, testified in front of Congress last year, and according to the entire intelligence community, Iran did not have a nuclear weapons program.
Okay. That they didn't have a nuclear weapons program. They were enriching past the point that they were allowed to for civilian use. Everyone knows that.
But that doesn't mean that they have a weapons program. There's a difference between having a weapons program, because you still need to weaponize, even if you get to weapons grade material, which they're still below weapons grade material, but you still need a weaponization process. And the United States intelligence community puts out an annual threat assessment, and in the 2025 annual threat assessment, you can go on this. It's literally publicly available information. Just look up 2025 U.S. Intelligence Community Annual Threat Assessment. Go to the section on Iran. Go to where it says WNDs. It says that we currently assess that they do not have a nuclear weapons program, meaning that they did not have an intention to pursue a nuclear weapon, despite what Netanyahu and Donald Trump and what the administration will tell you.
But do you understand a weaponization process is different than just enriching?
Do you think the Iranian regime before this war, the Iranian regime that has oppressed the people of Iran for 40 years,
and this is what happens when you are so unbelievably out of your depth. You pivot, right? Oh, what? So you just like the Islamic Republic of Iran. You just are a big fan of Ali Khamenei. That's what happens when they're out of their depth on an argument that they picked, right? Dave Rubin hasn't even effectively made a case for why wokeism has done more damage to America than Trump ever did, right? He's been entirely on the defensive, and as he was almost this entire hour and a half long video, he was on the defensive constantly. Has Dave once in our conversation attempted to make the case of how wokeism has done even a little bit of damage to America? All he's laid out was some fucking definition of wokeism, that it's about collective identity and collectivist thought, which we'll come to in a moment.
Do you think that was a good regime? Would you say that was a good government? Would you like to live under those people? Were they progressive in any way? Do they hold any of the values that any of you guys hold?
No, but we don't just start wars on countries whose politics we disagree with, or who are oppressive to their own people. We were actually an ally to Saudi Arabia, and Mohammed bin Salman ripped up.
That I agree with. You don't do that.
Okay,
we got something. All right, we got something.
We got something with Israel that has committed gross human rights violations in Gaza.
I'm shocked that Israel came up. Israel, the only place that has any of the progressive values that any of you guys share.
Really? This is perfect. This is perfect. Because one of the things that you told me at the beginning of this conversation was that wokeism was judging people based on characteristics and collective thought. Israel is literally centered around the prioritization of the Jewish people as a matter of policy. That is literally collectivist thought. So you must hate Israel too.
It is extraordinarily ironic. I mean, also one of the reasons why we laugh that Israel is woke is because it's an ethno-state. It's highly fascistic. Their government, especially now, is like the furthest right it's ever been. But it's an ethno-state, and it's also engaging in settler colonialism and all of the things that leftists generally are super opposed to. So very, very funny that he said that it's woke, because I guess they allow. If you get gay married elsewhere, they recognize it within Israel. They do like pride parades, despite them not actually doing gay marriages themselves. I guess, they have free healthcare for Israelis, but not the Palestinians that they occupy.
You must think that that's the ultimate form of collective identity, right?
How many Muslim countries are there? How many Muslim countries?
And once again with the pivot, it's just so embarrassing, dude. Like the face of total and complete embarrassment, right? I mean, where were we? We started with the war in Iran. He didn't want to get into the details on whether or not that was justified, whether or not the nuclear program was a good enough reason to start a war. And then he jumped to what, you just like the Islamic Republic of Iran? And I'm like, you don't need to like a government to say that we shouldn't go to war against their country. We're allies to governments who commit gross human rights violations. And then, of course, he pivots to Israel. And then now we're just like, oh, what about how many Muslim countries are there? A lot of Muslim countries are oppressive to their own people. It's literally, I literally conceded that in the case of both Saudi Arabia and the Islamic Republic of Iran. So I don't know how on earth like anyone can think this person is intelligent.
You're just pivoting?
No. I'm going to answer.
But wait, is Israel collectivist?
How many Muslim countries are there?
I'm sure there are a lot of Muslim countries.
You have any idea?
There are a lot more Muslims than Jews.
Yeah. Well, just ballpark. How many Muslim countries are there?
I would probably maybe say, like, let's say between 10 to 20, maybe.
All right, you're off by about 40. There's about 52 or 53 Muslim countries.
Yeah.
In any of those countries, how's it going for minorities, women, gays, Christians, Jews?
Yeah, I can say that other nations, it's extraordinarily repressive. But we got
to pause there. Pause there.
I did get a fair amount of time, which is totally fair. But wow, the pivot was just breaking your ankles, Dave. Okay, this conversation, this next one, was a lot more frustrating. And I do blame myself a little bit for making it frustrating on myself, because I should have just stuck to the 2020 election, because it's one of the most clear-cut cases of the right not living in reality and prioritizing ideology or even just prioritizing a cult leader like someone like Donald Trump. So, but I got sidetracked on the COVID stuff, and it's been a while since I've even like discussed COVID or looked into a lot of it. So it was a little difficult for me to remember all of the talking points on time, but nonetheless, Dave still did horribly. So we're gonna watch that part next.
We're out of time.
Yeah. My final surrounded claim is that the modern left cares more about ideology than reality.
All right, if you would like to debate this prompt, get to the chair in 3, 2, 1.
How's it going, Dave?
All right.
All right. Let's talk about reality.
Okay.
Let's talk about 3 things that exist in reality: climate change, Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, and vaccines out of COVID are effective and safe. The right does not accept any of those things.
Yeah.
Does Donald Trump accept the 2020 election results? And do Republicans broadly accept the 2020 election results still to this day?
I think there's a lot of questions about the 2020 election.
But does Donald Trump accept it?
Does Donald Trump? I think he thinks something went awry.
So he does not accept it. Now, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Dude, these people are such jokes. Okay, so 3 things that exist in reality. The COVID vaccine is safe and effective, number 1. Number 2, Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. And number 3, climate change exists, which we obviously didn't even touch on. But I asked him if Donald Trump accepts the 2020 election results, and do Republicans accept it broadly? The answer to that should just be no, right? But Dave Rubin, very cleverly, and this is something I should have caught in real time, he says, I'm pretty sure he has questions about it.
Went awry.
So he does not accept it. Now, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
I don't know.
No,
I know.
Really?
No, yeah, that's the truth. I know that he was not the president by the end of that, but I do know that in all the chaos of COVID and mail-in ballots and everything else, that somehow magically Joe Biden got something like 20 million more votes than Barack Obama. That's
magic. It was magic.
Little bit curious.
Yeah, voter turnout was incredibly high that election because voting was made easier.
Oh, because voting was, well, you might think it have something to do if you are doing mail-in ballots. There might be a little more access to fraudulent abilities.
You might think that, but you have to actually provide evidence to demonstrate that, right?
I'm just skeptical. I'm just skeptical of it.
So, okay.
I don't know.
But you don't accept it. And I think the central point is, again, that Donald Trump doesn't accept it. So if your claim is that the modern left doesn't care about reality and only cares about ideology, and yet you fully admit that Donald Trump not only, here's the other part, right, which is something, again, that I should have pointed out. It's not that Trump just doesn't accept it or that he has questions about the election. Trump makes the positive affirmative claim that the election was in fact rigged. That's how far Donald Trump goes. Trump went insofar as to attempt to send a fake slate of electors to get him certified to be the next president because he believes he won the 2020 election in a landslide, right? So it's not just a matter of Trump not accepting it because he has questions. It's what it's really down to is Trump goes insofar as to claim just outright falsehoods. And that's something that I wish I had pressed Dave Rubin on more, because that's not tapped into reality. It's one thing to even suggest that there were a few abnormalities about the election, right? It's another thing to say that it was rigged, and it was deliberately rigged in a conspiracy by the Democrats, which are what the claims that Trump actually makes.
Well, I don't know. I'm skeptical of it.
Okay, so if just
I would venture to say that a little skepticism is probably a good thing. Also, the COVID vaccines didn't work. I mean, that's a fact.
That is not a fact.
That is a fact.
That isn't.
And then this is my mistake because I should have just stuck with the 2020 election, but.
Got a COVID vaccine, could you get COVID?
If
you got a COVID, yes. Oh, you could.
The claim was
could you
never,
transmit it?
Yes, the claim was never that transmission was at 0%. That's not how vaccines work.
Joe Biden, hold on. Joe Biden, if you get the COVID vaccine, you will not get nor transmit COVID.
Okay,
that is what Joe Biden said.
But that's not the
Anthony
claim.
Fauci said that repeatedly.
That's not what the right claims about the COVID vaccine. Similarly.
So what I had brought up was that the COVID vaccine is safe and effective. And that's without a doubt the case. I think with the new variants, it's become less effective just because, that's just the way that, a lot of these variants have mutated. But the fact of the matter is that transmission is reduced, but that's not even the thing that I really should have focused on. It's the fact that death among those who are vaccinated is at a drastically lower rate than those who are unvaccinated. So people who have the vaccine and who have especially vulnerable groups who are maybe older or who have comorbidities, those people are drastically less likely to either die or suffer from some sort of great bodily harm if they had the vaccine.
Butcher yourself.
The right?
You said yes. We're talking about whether or not the right or the left accepts reality, correct? So the right claims that the COVID vaccine is unsafe and ineffective.
Yeah.
That's not true.
That is true.
No,
that is true.
Of the people who died from COVID, are the vast majority of them unvaccinated or vaccinated?
Hold on. Do you know
unvaccinated?
I know a young guy who's in his early 20s who never had any health.
So he refused to answer that, which I think is the central point that I should have stuck on further. I think at this point now, if you look at the deaths among COVID, currently most of the people who are dying are vaccinated, but that's just because the vast majority of the population is vaccinated. So you're just going to have a higher total share. But in terms of the death rate, it's without a doubt night and day who suffers and who's much more likely to die as a result of COVID, and it's people who are unvaccinated.
Wait. Who had never had any health problems, young, healthy guy in his early 20s who had to get the COVID vaccine to go to college, and he now has myocarditis.
Okay.
Does that interest you at all? Does that interest you? He had no reason to get a vaccine that would stop.
So this part really pisses me off, and you're going to see why. So right now he's telling an anecdote about someone a young man who got the COVID vaccine, and it sounds like he got some sort of myocarditis, which we know now is something that occurred as a matter for young men specifically when they would get the COVID vaccine. Now, the flip side of that, which I could have addressed, but is that I'm pretty sure even at or a little bit greater of the same rate, getting COVID also has a high rate of myocarditis among young males. So, but I mean, most of these cases of myocarditis were very acute, and then they pass, and there are no long-term health outcomes.
Stop him. It did not.
Whereas long COVID, we obviously know that there can be catastrophic consequences. But just pay attention to what happens here, because it really frustrates me.
Him from getting COVID, and he could still transmit COVID.
We don't use anecdotes and.
Do you see that? Do you see what just happened?
Stop him. It did not stop him from getting COVID, and he could still transmit COVID.
We don't use anecdotes in science. This is
They just did such a massive jump cut, and it really pissed me off that they did this. Jubilee is usually pretty good, especially with Surrounded. They only really will cut out either entire people, or once in one of the debates I did, they cut out an entire claim. But generally, they don't cut out segments of someone's debate. And that was a huge jump cut that felt very obvious, and I don't know why they did that. I remember what I said, though. I told Dave, I was like, I know people who go their entire life smoking cigarettes and then don't develop lung cancer. That is not evidence for cigarettes not being a cause of lung cancer, right? And then I say we don't use anecdotes in science. I don't know why they refuse to keep in that. It's not like a perfect analogy, but all the analogy really needs to demonstrate is that we don't use anecdotes in science. And there was no need to cut that out. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm talking about cigarette smoke and the cause of lung cancer. I don't know.
Let's pull it back to reality, right? Yeah. This is why science is so important. This is why the left actually likes science, because we understand that anecdotes aren't a good tool to use when assessing scientific research.
So you think the government the government should have been allowed to force people to get a vaccine.
Okay,
that
so now
was
we're
rushed.
pivoting. We're pivoting.
That was
We're
rushed
pivoting.
through
We're
by
pivoting.
Operation Warp Speed, which was
Yeah, and then he's pivoting, right?
Donald Trump, a guy you don't seem to like very much.
Right. Yeah, sure. But we're pivoting.
well, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
What do
yeah.
you
We're sure. I'm okay with Operation Warp Speed. I can.
So the guy
say
that you seem to be quite deranged about, Donald Trump, pushes through a vaccine very fast, and you're
right
okay
because
with
I
that.
want to ensure that people are healthy. But
You know what's funny too is he says that I'm deranged about Donald Trump, and yet he's like, wow, you're deranged about him, yet when he does something that you like that thing. That proves that I'm not deranged about Donald Trump. It proves that my disagreements with Trump and my hatred of Donald Trump is actually politically and ideologically focused, right? It's actually like I'm okay when Donald Trump does things that I ideologically disagree with. If I was deranged about Donald Trump, I would have disagreed with Operation Warp Speed because it's Donald Trump, because I have TDS, right? But because I even in this debate say I'm okay with Operation Warp Speed, it's that is if anything demonstrative or rather demonstrates that I'm not deranged.
Even though the vaccine
what I don't like
anything.
is the fact that Republicans and especially like right-wing influencers downplayed the efficacy of vaccines and claimed that they were unsafe or ineffective.
But they were ineffective.
No, they weren't.
Right, so we have a fundamental
if it
difference
reduces,
on that.
if it reduces,
young healthy people had no reason.
If it
to
reduces
get the vaccine.
the rate of transmission,
It reduces the rate of transmission, and it reduces the rate of death, and it reduces the rate of great bodily harm. Those are the three things that are important to focus on.
That is literally what a vaccine is intended to do.
And it's more safe to get the vaccine than to risk getting COVID and dealing with whatever consequences you may face as a result of getting the disease.
We were sold. The bill of goods that they sold us was that you would not get nor transmit COVID. That is the president of the United States' words as he was forcing people to get that vaccine.
If he said that, then I would agree that his assessment of it was false.
He's the president of the United States.
You
should.
Do you think? Wait.
Are you saying?
Speaking of presidents of the United States,
are you saying we should have been forced
how about
into?
Donald Trump?
It's so rich coming from these people for them to say he's the president of the United States. He should watch what he says about science or what he says about the truth. Jesus Christ, talk about fucking hypocrisy.
Suggesting that people should drink bleach or do hydroxychloroquine. He's the president of the United States. Do you think that was at all?
Right, the bleach thing is a completely made up farce. The bleach, he told people to inject bleach. Have you seen the whole quote?
I didn't even say that. He suggested that it would be an effective treatment.
You think he told people to inject bleach?
He suggested that things like hydroxychloroquine were effective at means preventing COVID. That's not the case.
There were all sorts of other treatments. There were monoclonal treatments. People did use HCQ. There were all sorts of things.
I mean, at least I also had the fact checks just fucking dunking on him on these. Trump promoted hydroxychloroquine as a COVID treatment contrary to evolving medical evidence, and he publicly speculated about using disinfectant inside the body. Comments doctors called dangerous and baseless. However, he did not literally instruct Americans to inject bleach, but I didn't claim that either.
People used other things, but that doesn't mean that that the vaccine wasn't the most safe and effective means.
Well, there used to be something called herd immunity. There used to be that young people would actually go outside and get sun and run around and do exercise and not be sitting inside playing video games all day and taking takeout food and getting fatter and everything else. Like, you might want to encourage people to be healthy rather than take a largely experimental vaccine.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna fucking solve obesity in time to prepare people for the spread of COVID-19. I'm sorry.
That turned out not to be a vaccine.
First of all, I don't know what you mean by not a vaccine. It's clearly a vaccine.
It wasn't a vaccine.
It doesn't mean just because something is a vaccine doesn't mean it's 0% transmissibility.
Okay, we got pause there. You've been voted out.
I don't know why Dave Rubin decided to do this. He got bodied into oblivion by every single debater in such an embarrassing way that even everyone on the right couldn't help but acknowledge. But moreover, he then took to some podcast, I think with Jillian Michaels, the former trainer of The Biggest Loser, and suggested that we were like threatening to his life and that if there wasn't security there would be some of us actually wanted to kill him. That's literally something, unalive him. Sorry, TikTok language, but yeah, insane. Just I think he's I think is the only thing he could have possibly done in the aftermath of this is just to try to suggest that we were terrible people. Why did he make that claim? I have no idea. You guys saw like anything that would have, what's actually funny is after the video, he got up, he like exchanged a few words with a few people, nothing crazy, by the way. Here's another thing. I admitted to him because back when I was like 13, 14 years old, I actually liked Dave Rubin. I was one of those people who, because I know a lot of lefties, especially in my space, are like, who even watches this guy? Because he's not compelling, he's not smart. But I was one of those people who watched him. But at the time, I still considered myself a liberal. And at the time, he had enough plausible deniability to still be considered a quote unquote liberal. So I was like, oh, he's very interesting. He just likes, liberalism and classical liberalism and doesn't like the new woke left. And I'm against that as well. So I told him after the shoot, I was like, hey, I was like, hey, Dave, like I used to actually like the Rubin report. And you know what he told me? He was like, well, I don't like you. Actually, but he didn't even look me in the eye. So he said, well, I don't like you. And then continued to walk away. So, yeah, we threatened his life. There you go.